The term church fathers refers to the men who led in the advancement of the New Testament church in the early generations after the apostles. History confirms that there were many godly, faithful, courageous disciples of Jesus after all of the apostles were gone, who took seriously Paul's challenge in 2 Timothy 2:2. And the things that thou hast heard of me among many witnesses, the same commit thou to faithful men, who shall be able to teach others also. Three of the most impactful were Ignatius, Polycarp, and Irenaeus. Ignatius was born around 30 AD in Antioch, Syria. Ignatius was a disciple of the Apostle John, and he became the third pastor of the church in Antioch, the same church where the disciples were first called Christians, and the same church that had sent out the first missionaries, Paul and Barnabas. Ignatius had a strong reputation for being a godly, diligent, faithful servant of Jesus, so much so that he earned the surname Theophorus, which means the bearer of God. Ignatius faithfully preached the core doctrines of the faith, and he stood firmly against those who taught heresy. While Ignatius was pastoring in Antioch, Trajan, emperor of Rome, came to Antioch to offer great sacrifices to the gods, praising them for his recent victories in battle against several eastern nations. Ignatius preached a public rebuke against Emperor Trajan for his idolatry, and Trajan was so angry that he had Ignatius arrested. Because Ignatius was beloved in Antioch, Trajan decided not to execute him there. He had 10 soldiers take Ignatius back to Rome, where he was to be thrown to the lions. He made sure to inform Ignatius of his fate before his journey to Rome began. But Ignatius wasn't fazed. Instead, he used the journey to write letters to churches in many cities, including Smyrna, Ephesus, Philadelphia, Philippi, and Rome. When they arrived in Rome, the Roman leaders tortured him, trying to force him to deny Christ and offer sacrifices to their gods. When these efforts failed, they led him to what is now called the Colosseum, to face the lions. Word had spread throughout the city that a preacher had been brought from Syria to be fed to the lions. The Colosseum was filled with people as Ignatius was led to the center of the arena. The crowd hushed to hear Ignatius speak. "O ye Romans, I am the grain of God. I am ground by the teeth of the beast, that I may be found a pure bread of Christ, who is to me the bread of life." The crowd then heard the roar of the 2 lions that were released into the arena. They quickly devoured the body of Ignatius, leaving only a few of his bones. This martyrdom took place in 111 AD. When the Apostle John addressed his letter in Revelation chapter 2 to the pastor of the persecuted church in Smyrna, the man who would read the letter was named Polycarp. Polycarp was born in the city of Smyrna in the late 60s AD. Historians of his day say that Polycarp was introduced to Christ through the preaching of John, and that it was John who appointed Polycarp as the pastor in Smyrna. Polycarp had a very broad influence among the churches because of his godly reputation and his devotion to the truth. He played an important role in the canonization of the New Testament and in the advancement of the New Testament church. Polycarp's letter to the Philippians, though obviously not inspired scripture, is still a blessing to read. In it, Polycarp quotes 19 of the 27 New Testament books. In 155 AD, while Polycarp was praying one day, he fell asleep and dreamed that a pillow on which his head was resting was on fire. When he woke up, he took that to mean that he was to be burned to death for Christ. 3 days later, Polycarp was arrested and taken for execution. When they urged him to deny Jesus, he famously replied, 86 years I have served him, and he hath done me no wrong. How can I speak evil of my king? They laid his body on the pile of wood, and they lit the fire. Amazingly, the fire seemed to have little effect on his body, so the executioner thrust Polycarp through with a sword. Irenaeus was born in Smyrna around 125 AD. His pastor, Polycarp, led him to Christ and taught him the Christian faith. Irenaeus would write a book titled Against the Heresies, in which he quoted the New Testament 1,800 times. Irenaeus was regarded by his peers and by those who came after him as the most brilliant of the church fathers and as the first theologian. He preached the pre-tribulation rapture and the premillennial return of Christ. He went to the region of Gaul as a missionary and was pastor in Lyons, France. In the persecution of Christians led by the Roman Emperor Severus, all the believers in Lyons, France were beheaded. But soldiers had special orders to find and torture Irenaeus before executing him, which they did on June 28, 210 AD. These three men, Ignatius, Polycarp, and Irenaeus, never saw Jesus for themselves, were all influenced directly or indirectly by the Apostle John, and they were all martyred for the faith. Christian, the faith that you have learned, the same commit thou to faithful men, who shall be able to teach others also. Stay the course.